So, Rajesh, I want to start with the most important aspect of any software solution today, whether it's a cloud or whether it is on-premise or anything, which is the security. Because today every application, the main issue and the main challenge which we are having today with any type of IT environment is how secure or what are the best practices and all that. So, currently, considering the last 24 months, how would you summarize the overall the overall security improvements or the focus of security in ManageEngine? Go ahead.
Okay. So, talking particularly about the last 2 years, 24 months or so, from ManageEngine perspective, we see two important areas where customers face a lot of challenge. So one is identity security, the first area. When I say identity, it's about user identity, the machine identities, the endpoint identities, application identities. There's so many entities in the technology infrastructure talking to each other, accessing information, modifying information. And I started with saying what we observe in the last 2 years. The factor of a lot of people working remotely, right? It's not just people, they also carry the device out of their corporate network. That makes security itself like fundamentally identity security, right? So for a long time, the perception understanding was keep everything inside a secure network. It at least gave a false sense of perception that things were secure, but that's not the case anymore. So people just move across wherever they want, borrow devices, they just like give their corporate devices to family and things like that. So this is the first primary challenge when it comes to security. How do you authenticate users? And not just that, you don't authenticate users separately, devices separately, applications separately. You have to find context. Which user is using which device from which network to access which corporate application, what context of data. So the identity context has to flow through this set of entities, users and devices and applications. And that is the first thing that we are focusing on in ManageEngine. So much so, we used to be primarily an ITSM vendor, IT service management vendor. We are more and more positioning identity security, access management security as our primary solutions, right? We believe this is going to be a very important challenge for companies going forward. And the second one, which is equally important, that follows from the identity problem that I talked about, is the endpoint security, right? Because we used to talk jargons like devices, right? So laptops and mobile devices and all of that. But today we have all agreed in the technology landscape, at least, that we are dealing with endpoints, because endpoints are no longer just hardware. It is every single application inside your devices. Every single browser tab, right, is an endpoint. Because today browsers are their own operating system. They do a lot of intelligent things. You are allowed to install plugins, extensions, all of that. Most corporate information applications are consumed through browsers, right? So it's not just the hardware entities, more and more software entities are also becoming endpoints. And you have all those kiosks installed in a company setup, right? So every device today, right, so is intelligent, has an IP address, has the ability to communicate. So any one channel, right, so that you fail to secure in any of your endpoints could actually lead to a potentially disastrous attack. So this is how malwares come in, ransomware come in. So our focus has primarily been around identity security and endpoint security in the last couple of years.
Fantastic. Now you mentioned about remote work. So what is the so-called dashboard to separate, let's say, the network perimeter environment versus an external? I mean, how does ManageEngine orchestrate and present these two environments?
Yeah, I mean, one way to do it is like sort of don't segregate, right? So whether it's users or devices, they are inside corporate boundary or whether they are outside of it, right? Treat all of them same, regardless of your network. which is where the most talked about concept comes in, the zero trust concept. If a user or a device, regardless of if they are connected on an airport network or inside a corporate network, treat them the same, give them the least privileges to just get in, right? And depending on what action they want to do, elevate the privileges just in time, right? Again, what is very important here is don't look at users as a siloed entity. So look at the user, look at the device they are using on. If they are using a corporate device, give them more privileges. If they are using a corporate device connected from inside a corporate network, the application would show more privileges, right? But when the context goes down, the system should have the intelligence to not allow them certain actions, right? Typical examples I would give, I'm a salesperson, I'm traveling around. When I access my CRM system sitting in the airport, I could still see a lot of data, but saving a file locally or printing it out, those options would be disabled. One column that I see on the applications could be hidden because I could be under eavesdrop attack, right? But if I am connected inside a corporate network, that's very different. So those things would automatically open up, right? This contextual security is very important. So you don't fragment and sort of statically fragment and assume one is more secure than the other. So bring context to the security that you are doing.
Okay, so that's a good point. But nowadays, some of the security applications which we have seen, there were recently some updates which I was looking at, are now presenting the exact location.
Right.
For some reason or the other, the physical or the proximity location is being displayed. So I was asking from that context. So is that also an important aspect? What you mentioned is correct. Okay, that all users should be the same, and you just change the privileges based on where they are vis-a-vis the network. But the physical location, the geolocation, is that an important aspect?
It is an important aspect, right? So because your geolocation, depending on the savviness of the user, right, could be open to attackers, right? And that is, in that perspective, it is a very important point, right? So you could have the best of systems, best of technologies deployed. End of the day, there is a human in the chain, right? So if they do not know, right, so how to handle their location, or it's a matter of like one silly misconfiguration, right? So where they use an app, they give it privileges that discloses their location, right? So which is why the endpoint management becomes very, very important. As long as somebody is accessing corporate information, so the system itself would not allow people to disclose their locations at all, right? So that sort of control has to be brought in.
Okay, another important thing which is happening nowadays is that enterprises are being looked at in terms of core, the so-called perimeter and the edge, and the distributed WAN and all that. Is there, how are those aspects managed inside ManageEngine? Although, like you have said, the user is in terms of their profile and their context.
Right.
But in terms of how this enterprise is structured and where people are in that enterprise, if you can put edges apart and this thing.
Right.
How is that managed nowadays?
Yeah. So to manage those, we have a completely separate set of offerings, right? So this IT operations management. So how you design your infrastructure, commission your infrastructure, right? So operationalize that, monitor performance of those infrastructure, and users using applications in those infrastructure, what their user experience is, how they perceive, right? So that comes under the purview of our IT operations management. So like how you mentioned, so you could have your infrastructure completely moving to the edge depending on how you want to segment and operate. And to model all of that, to get into each of the component there and monitor. So both in terms of monitoring the basic performance parameters to the level of like, we even go to the effect of profiling deep application performance, right? If you take an application, so you have the user engagement part, which could be where they go to a browser and talk to the application. And on the back end, the application is talking to the database, right? So our JDBC connection. So we look into each and every query, right? And we look into each and every user requests coming into the application. We look into every communication that the application makes to talk to external entity and see where the bottleneck is, right? So we identify pain points there, we identify bottlenecks there to make sure not just the basic things are working, but the users also perceive good experience consuming technology, right? So that is a separate suite of products that we have in ManageEngine.
Let's go to SolarWinds.
Right.
SolarWinds was one of the most trusted IT management applications, and yet it got significantly compromised.
Right.
What is the thinking now from the developers of ManageEngine? How do you make sure that your customers, when they ask you this question, you have some reasonable answer to give them? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody from the same industry, right? So it's unfortunate what happened with SolarWinds. Mm-hmm. I do believe it was not the case of SolarWinds being not being good enough or whatever. They just happened to be at the wrong time, wrong place. So they were under attack from nation actors, right? These are not amateurs attacking. So the incentives, right, were very, very high. Mm-hmm. So this could happen to any company. That is the lesson that we took, right? So from ManageEngine point of view, we did not want to assume we were good, we were better, right? So that incident gave us a real good impetus to just go back to the drawing board, what we are doing right, what we need to improve. All of that happened, right? So that way it basically helped us a lot. And in the last 2-3 years, right? So starting from when GDPR was enforced in the European Union in 2018, we had this fundamental belief, right? So as a company, we wanted to be privacy first and security first. And this incident actually gave us a lot of incentive to go back to the drawing board and see what we could improve a lot. We did identify a lot of gaps, if I have to be brutally honest. There were things that we were not doing well, and to the best of our abilities, so we could fix all of them. So we do have an internal red team inside the company, right? That really works like a motivated external attacker. They identified a lot of issues, and we also engage third-party penetration testing, third-party source code analysis. So these are things that we were not doing at a real great frequency before, but in the last 12 to 18 months, this has been given very, very high priority in all the products across ManageEngine, right? So much so that every team has a security owner, right? We understand security cannot be outsourced, right? So you cannot have one central security team magically implanting security into all the products. As much as we invest in basic feature development, customer support, all of that, we have a special renewed focus on doing security, right? We have hired a head of security for ManageEngine, so who not only looks at our product development, but also the entire operations, right? We have a complete new structure, and they sit with every product team, individual product team, to make sure our ManageEngine supply chain, right? So the third-party products that we could be using in the stack, right? The open source components we use in the stack, right? And the third parties that we technically and officially integrate with, right? We open our APIs for integration with other third parties, and security of that API gateway, all of those, we look into each component and are working to increase our security portion.
So the next question is that just overall, we have at least 4 to 5 key players in this ITSM space,
right?
Whether it is Unicenter or Micro Focus or Threshold.
Right.
So what is the positioning? How are each of these players taking up distinct positioning? Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting question, but ManageEngine this year, 2022, we are celebrating our 20th year in existence in the business. So the way I'll put it is, we do observe competition, we follow competition, but we do not obsess over competition. So we think we can chart our own path, and that's how we have grown and been in business last 20 years. Our path forward would be listen to our customers, right? So understand their pain point and solve their problems, And one thing we fundamentally believe is like growing very organically, right? So that way it is not like a product positioning differentiation, it's more of a philosophical differentiation. We do not take any external funding, venture funding. We are a company who has grown organically and will continue to do so. And which is what has enabled us to have 60 products in the ManageEngine product suite, right? Which I don't think any of the other players have, barring like the big one or two. ManageEngine alone has 60 different products today. You take any function inside the technology organization, we cover, right? And the other thing is we also like obsess a lot over staying relevant to customer problems, right? So it's not like you build a product and you are looking to exit, but you are in the business to play the long game, and all the points that I talked about, right? So it is to understand what the current day problems are and staying relevant and solving those problems. And we also leverage our other business unit, Zoho.com, which solves a lot of business problems outside of IT. And what we see is the line between IT teams and other functions are like slowly diminishing, right? It's moving to a model where every function inside a business is starting to have their own technology team. So much so that every person has to be a techie today, right? So that's the world we live in. So there is no separate IT team anymore, technology team anymore. They are only people who understand certain things better. Say, for example, they understand technology, they understand regulations. They just make sure things like governance and compliance happen. But otherwise, every single employee inside a company has to be a techie, has to be a technology person. So which is where ManageEngine and Zoho coming together, a proposition which will not be matched by other competition, but it is not in our control. What we can control is what we can do. So ManageEngine will continue from 60 products to having 70, 80 products. Zoho will continue to have like 100 to 120 products. And we look to solve problems end to end for our customers. So today, Zoho completely runs with our own technology, and that is our vision. So any business, regardless of size, location, be able to completely run on Zoho and ManageEngine technologies.
Okay, so interesting over there, you mentioned about 60 products. So is ManageEngine in a position to safeguard, monitor, optimize, let's say IoT or transformation as a focus?
Yes.
One is managing all the IT operations. The other one is that the specific to, let's say there is a cloud migration, or let's say there is a specific IoT deployment,
right,
or an industrial IoT deployment.
Yes.
Does ManageEngine have products does have visibility into these areas?
Yeah. So ManageEngine does not have yet on the IoT space, but Zoho as a company does have. So we have a separate suite of products called Zoho IoT, right? So which caters to the IoT market, right? So all that you talked about, commissioning, monitoring your complete IoT infrastructure from the cloud, where your IoT systems are going to be like spread across geography. So where you put all those sensors that would talk to IoT devices, collect huge loads of data, send it back to the cloud, and we have our Zoho systems that would collect all these data and help you operationalize, monitor what's happening in the IoT infrastructure. So Zoho IoT is indeed a focus area for the company. Yes.
Any reason why IoT is not inside ManageEngine?
So primarily the ManageEngine's focus, our positioning is more towards the enterprise technology. And even when we go into enterprise IT, we are starting to move to other departments, right? So we have our service management offering that is being used by other functions, other departments in the organization. So that is the focus. But Zoho already saw an opportunity to play in the IoT space, right? But I will not rule out, because we are the same company technically. So the day is not long, like when ManageEngine would leverage that Zoho IoT into our own suite.
Okay, now increasingly many of the so-called IT environments are increasingly becoming pure play automation. So what do you mean by that? For example, the connected car or the autonomous car, let's say, or then we have these flying taxis, then we have aircraft, and then we have standard machines which are supposed to be remotely managed. So does ManageEngine consider this as part of the IT, or again, this will need to be an extended outside ManageEngine?
Yeah. So today with the visibility I have, so we don't play in the space yet. We don't consider it IT yet, right? So this is more on the automation and the IoT space, right? And as I said, we do look for hooks to integrate with our Zoho application suite. And that is how we'll bring the IoT play into ManageEngine. Say, for example, today, ManageEngine already integrates really well with some of the Zoho applications, right? So the complete analytics platform is powered from the Zoho division. So we use the low-code platform from the Zoho division inside ManageEngine, right, as an offering. So we use the remote control and remote assistance technology from the Zoho side inside ManageEngine. So it's already been happening, and the other way is also true. Zoho leverages a lot of ManageEngine. So we are just two divisions, two brands inside the same company. We have our own positioning, focus on who we cater, but where it matters, where the context requires, we do integrate, right? So to your question of if you are like going to see automated cars and flying cars as management entities under IT, not yet in ManageEngine, but as a company Zoho, yes.
Okay. The other aspect is the data center. So the lot of the data centers are now increasingly becoming like hyperscaler.
Right.
I mean, the whole model is changing, that if the data center is too small, you don't really need it. You might as well. And the ones where it matters, you need to be really big.
Right.
Does ManageEngine play in that hyperscaler space, or are you still looking at the mid IT organization?
Yeah, so we are still, our sweet spot is the mid-range players. So hyperscaler is definitely in our radar. That would be the next goal for us to scale. Obviously.
What is the challenge in that place in terms of setting, having an application which can understand what's happening on a hyperscale? What are the challenges there?
My first challenge, right? So in what we have explored so far would be the scale, right? The scale of data that you have to collect, consume, analyze, process, and make insights out of, right? So that is something that needs a strong framework that we first need to build. And that is the DNA of the company, right? So first build a framework on top of which you start to build applications, whether it is network management or IT management, or now how we do artificial intelligence. So first go build your framework capabilities and then build specific solutions for specific problems on top of it. So we haven't really looked into solving real high-end problem like iScalers, right, yet, to be honest again.